What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. We are live for episode 123. Today is Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. And we're going to get into some NFL picks, college football picks, and then NFL Panic Meter. But joining me from Austin, Texas, as always, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. What's up?
What is up, everybody? Welcome back. Episode 123 of the Raw Prospect Podcast. What a great first couple weeks of football that we've gotten so far. And we're going on already to week 5 in college football, which is kind of crazy, all things considered. And week 4 in the NFL. I'm excited for today's episode, obviously. We have an exciting panic meter segment that we're going to do about midway through the show today. We have about 5 or 6 teams that we're going to talk about for a variety of different reasons. I'm really excited for that. And I'm also excited, of course, to get going with these picks. We did a little bit better last week. We were a little bit more in the green, if you will. But we're looking to improve even more as the season goes on. Before we jump right in, a couple things to say. Number one, we're going to talk about sports for the next hour and 30 minutes. But I'd be remiss if we didn't say that we're thinking about everybody who has been affected or is going to be affected by Hurricane Ian, which made landfall today just outside of Fort Myers in Florida. It's close to a Category 5 hurricane. So thoughts and prayers with everybody who's been affected so far and will be affected in the future. Hopefully everything ends up okay. Secondly, congratulations to Aaron Judge for finally tying the single-season American League home run record tonight in Toronto against the Blue Jays. The Yankees, of course, clinched the AL East title last night, but Judge, after it took him about a week between 60 and 61, but he finally got the right pitch to hit after being walked a ton the past week, and he crushed it. A line drive out to left center at the Rogers Center in Toronto. Quick note on baseball. The playoffs start next Friday. The regular season ends next Wednesday. So if I had to guess, we'll probably be doing something related to the MLB playoffs next Wednesday or Thursday. So be on the lookout for that. Also, we're doing an NBA episode hopefully tomorrow, if not Friday. So also be on the lookout for that. We're going to start getting back into basketball as the NBA season kicks off in about 3 weeks. But without further ado, let's jump right in, and we'll start with college football picks.
Yeah. So first game is the Kentucky Wildcats visiting the Ole Miss Rebels. Rebels favored -6.5. What are you thinking?
This is an interesting game. Kentucky, undefeated so far. They've looked all right. Although they did struggle to put away Northern Illinois last week, they now face another serious test on the road at Ole Miss. This is a place that Kentucky has not won since 1986. They're 0-6 in Oxford since that time, although they have not played in Oxford since 2010. So it's been a while, but they still haven't won in Oxford in over 35 years. This is a Kentucky running game that, if you look at the statistical output so far this season, they rank 123rd, averaging just 81.5 yards on the ground per game so far, and that's not against the stiffest of competition that they're about to face here coming up in SEC play. Although they have been without their star running back, Chris Rodriguez, who in his career in 38 career games, has 26 touchdowns on the ground rushing, with almost 3,000 career rushing yards. On the other hand, they actually lead the SEC as of right now in rushing yards at about 280 per game. However, although they do have an improved defense under Lane Kiffin this year, only allowing 40 points so far this season. They gave up 262 yards on the ground last week in a 35-27 close home win that they had to scratch out over a not-so-great Tulsa team. So when I look at this game, what it's really going to come down to is, number one, on the Kentucky side of the ball, we obviously know Will Levis, Kentucky's quarterback, has high hopes to be drafted high next year, and he's probably the better quarterback in this particular game. We know Jackson Dart's talented, but he's a younger kid. This is his first full year in the system, so he's still trying to get his bearings under him. He's going up against a pretty tough Kentucky defense. However, it's going to be Will Levis's ability to create more explosive plays downfield to those receivers, and I'm hoping that the running game with Chris Rodriguez, which has struggled to this point, can help him out and create more downfield plays through play action, because the running game will be better. I think since this is in Oxford, it's going to be a raucous environment. Ole Miss has that like quick twitch, quick score ability, and they can run the football. And I've seen it from them to this point. I'm going to pick them to win the game. However, I don't know that they can cover the spread. I do think you're going to see a better Kentucky offense. This is going to come down late into the fourth quarter. I just foresee, and this is my gut feeling, Ole Miss at home making one or two more plays than Kentucky. But I do think that Chris Rodriguez return will significantly help this Kentucky offense. I think it's going to be a one-score game. It's going to come down to the last couple of drives. I'm going to pick Ole Miss to win, but I'm going to take Kentucky to cover the 6.5 point spread.
Okay. I think Kentucky is a really solid football team all around. I'm not sure how to feel about Ole Miss right now, just off the fact that, as you mentioned, they haven't played that great of competition so far this year. And really, like, their quarterback is young. This is really his first huge game of his career, I'd say. And Kentucky has been in the mix in a lot of close games this year already. They've had reps in close situations already this year. And I just think that experience really matters, especially on the road in a tough environment like that. So I'm going to pick Kentucky here to win outright, and obviously cover the spread as well, since they are the underdog. I'm not, overly confident about that pick, but I just think Will Levis, I think this will be one of his better games of the season.
Fair enough. And I could certainly see that, but we'll have to see. So without further ado, we should move right along. Our next game is another, by the way, I feel like this is sort of going under the radar. Five matchups this weekend in college football between opponents ranked in the top 25. I think they're not maybe like the most flashiest of games in terms of program names, but if you watch some of these teams, these are going to be really good games. I hope that shows this weekend. I think the middle class has gotten stronger in college football this year, but that's another conversation for another day. Number 2, Alabama at number 20, Arkansas, who's coming off a real loss to A&M last week. What do you think? The line that I put on the spreadsheet is minus 17. It has actually creeped all the way up to 17 and a half. But for our sakes, we'll use minus 17. What do you think?
I think this Arkansas team is just really well coached. One thing we've known the last couple of years is they're not gonna go out there and beat themselves. They may not have the level of talent that Alabama does or a Georgia does, but I feel like when we've seen them in those types of games, they've put up a good fight. And I think KJ Jefferson also presents a different type of challenge for that Alabama defense. I know that pass rush for Alabama is all world. They have, possibly the number one overall pick for next year's draft and Will Anderson on the edge. But I just think KJ Jefferson's ability to run and throw, as we've seen in years past, that's the combination that has given Alabama fits. So if KJ Jefferson can just make plays outside of the pocket as a thrower as well as a runner, like keep the defense on its heels a little bit. I feel pretty good about Arkansas covering here. And also another key thing is Alabama has had struggles on the road over the going back to last season. Some of their closer games, some of their worst performances of the season were on the road, and they also had that performance against Texas this year where they were on the ropes for the majority of that game. So I'm going to pick Arkansas to cover and Alabama to win, and I'm feeling I feel pretty confident about that.
I agree with you. And look, if Arkansas secondary wasn't as bad as it is, I don't know if I would take Arkansas to win, but I definitely have Bama on upset alert this week. I think that if you look at what Bama has been so far this year, and obviously it's Nick Saban, we know what Bama's going to end up doing. They're probably going to end up running the somehow, some way. They're going to find a way. The defense is just too good to not. And they're getting some of the receivers that they had hurt back off the injured list. So that should help the offense. We haven't really seen the typical separation from these Bama receivers that we've seen in years past. And this offensive line for Bama is still sort of a work in progress. It's a pretty young offensive line. They lost a guy like Evan Neal last year. And we're so used to Bama just, being a factory of offensive and defensive linemen, being able to replace these guys year after year. But it just so happens that this offensive line has sort of struggled to this point. And Arkansas has the athletes up front to maybe make it somewhat difficult for them once again. If Texas could do it, I think Arkansas can do it. They can make this difficult for Bryce Young, and they're going to have to because their secondary needs as much help as it can get. But you're exactly right. The thing you said about Alabama struggling on the road, dating back to last season, is spot on. In fact, 4 of their last 5 road games have been decided by 1 score or less. So that includes the Texas game from a couple weeks ago, and that dates all the way back to the Auburn game last year and a couple other games that those teams had Bama on the ropes. So I think going on the road to Knoxville in a couple weeks, having to face Hendon Hooker will be a much tougher test for this Bama team than this Arkansas team right now, just because I think that Tennessee defense is a step ahead especially on the back end, than this Arkansas defense is. However, I do think the challenges that KJ Jefferson presents, total 330 yards and 3 touchdowns last year against this Alabama defense. And they still had Will Anderson and Dallas Turner at that time. So no reason for me to think that he can't do that again at home. And Sam Pittman, you're exactly right, is going to get his guys up to play this game. There's no doubt about that. So even if they lose, I see a valiant effort from this Arkansas football team, especially coming off that not so great loss to A&M last week. So I'm going to take Arkansas to cover the spread pretty comfortably. Actually, I think this could be a 10-point game going down, down the wire. But I do think Bama will win the game.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next game is Oklahoma State at Baylor, playing in Waco. The rematch of last year's Big 12 championship that came down to the final play. Oklahoma State is currently undefeated. What do you think here?
Rematch of last year's Big 12 championship game. In fact, if you look at the Big 12 right now, I can make the argument that it's the most competitive conference, top to bottom, in the country. That doesn't mean it's the best conference, but if you look at some of these games on a week basis, they're coming down to the wire. I mean, this conference is competitive. Now that we have Kansas undefeated, Oklahoma is still, I think, a really good football team, although K-State has just had their number for whatever reason the past couple of years. Even West Virginia, I think, could present a good challenge for Texas this weekend. And they're, TCU is playing better than we thought. Iowa State, that's always a tough place to go in. I mean, this conference right now, Oklahoma State, Baylor, could be legitimate playoff contenders if they run the table. I mean, it's tough right now on a week-to-week basis. There are no off weeks right now in the Big 12. But this matchup right here, I'm so excited to watch. It's the number one offense in the nation right now, leading the nation in scoring, with Oklahoma State averaging over 50 points per game, 1.7 points per game, against the top-notch defense. 16.8 points per game allowed so far this season. I'm not sure that's tops in the nation, but it's definitely top 5, top 10. You look at what Spencer Sanders has been able to do so far this year. I think it's kind of going overlooked. 916 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, only 1 pick. He's been one of the best or most productive quarterbacks in the country. But he has struggled against this Baylor defense. 5 touchdowns to 10 interceptions in 4 games in his career at Oklahoma State against Baylor. This game is at home. A big game for Baylor. You can't go to 2 losses in the Big 12 and let Oklahoma State go to 4-0. I really like Oklahoma State as a football team. I think their defense has regressed just a little bit, and we saw that in the opener against Central Michigan. I think at the end of the day, this Dave Aranda football team will be ready to play. I've bet against Baylor the past couple of weeks, and it's come back to bite me. So I think I'm going to take Baylor in a big game in Waco that's going to come down to the wire. I mean, you just know it is. And Blake Shapen, give him credit, looked a lot better than he has been. The quarterback for Baylor looked a lot better against the tough Iowa State defense last week. The passing game got going. They're going to be able to run the football. I think Baylor wins and they cover the spread.
Okay. Yeah, this game is one that people circled on the schedule. Anyone who is a fan of the Big 12 looked at this game like, okay, this one might decide who comes out on top in the conference or who gets into the Big 12 championship game at least. And Oklahoma State, I mean, right now controls their own destiny right now in this conference. But as you said, there's no games off in this conference schedule. I mean, every single team is at the very least competitive, and Kansas as well. I think they have the seventh best, like in terms of win quality, seventh best on
Yeah.
like the scale that they have. So every single team will give you a test. But as for this game, I don't really feel inclined to pick one way or the other here. But I am gonna pick Oklahoma State to cover the spread, and I think I'll pick Baylor to win just because I think the home field advantage will make the difference here. I don't think I don't have a strong feeling towards either side here. Is what's really the thing here. Um, I think it might just come down to execution in the fourth quarter. I think it's going to be a defensive battle for the most part in this game, and I think um, it might be some weird ref ball in the fourth quarter. Knowing Big 12 referees in their history, I think that might be what it comes down to. I hope it doesn't, but I'm gonna pick Baylor to win and Oklahoma State to cover. I think it'll be a 1 or 2 point game.
I'm in the same basket you are. I certainly don't feel super confident about picking Baylor. I just think at this point, what you've seen, I do think this is going to end up being sort of a lower scoring game. Baylor's going to be able to run the football, hope to control time of possession. And Blake Shapen, say what you want about him, has played better the past couple of weeks and played well against Oklahoma State defense in the Big 12 championship last season. So he's sort of seen, it's not like he's seen or is afraid of these hasn't seen or is afraid of these bigger moments. I think the key for Baylor is just going to be having that spy in the middle of the field for Spencer Sanders, because if you don't, he can hurt you with your legs, and that's where you don't want to get in trouble. But it could go either way. This game is honestly a coin flip. I just see maybe Baylor getting a field goal or one play at the end in the fourth quarter to sort of separate themselves. But, I mean, it's honestly 50-50.
Okay, yeah. Let's move on here. We're about 23 minutes in, pretty good pace. Next game is Wake Forest coming off a overtime loss against Clemson at home, taking on Florida State in Tallahassee. Not sure what the weather will be like for this game. Also, it's in Florida, so I know it's not going to be near the heart of the storm. It'll be more so towards, I think, the southwest part of Florida. But nonetheless, it will probably be a rainy game, or at the very least, a very wet game. Um, so, what are you thinking here?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it is great for college football if some of the trends that we've seen the first couple of weeks continue. First of all, we've gotten some parity that people have been asking for the past couple of years. Number two, some of these programs that we've been begging to have back, for the past 5-10 years, they're showing themselves right now. USC, say what you want about them. They might not be able to compete on the highest level right now. They don't have the horses that they need defensively. But, I mean, you look at their schedule, they could certainly run the table with that offense of theirs that they have. In the Pac-12, Florida State's another team on the other side of the country. Mike Norvell, tough first couple of years at Florida State, had to get his bearings under him. But some of the recruits that's gone on the past couple of years. I think this is good for the ACC and it's good for college football. And Jordan Travis, you look at what he's been able to do at the quarterback position, not only in the run game, but his progression as a passer this season has been what stood out to me. Making plays off platform. When the pocket breaks down, he gets outside the pocket and he finds a way to make a play. That's really been the difference for Florida State this season. They've had a good run game, and they have some athletes on the defensive front that can get after the quarterback. That's never been an issue. My question always with this Mike Norvell coach Florida State team has been, are they going to make that mistake that's going to end up beating themselves? That's been the issue at Florida State. Turnovers here, maybe a mistake in the game there, mismanagement of the clock, et cetera, et cetera. That's really killed this Florida State team. But they found ways to win. They've won in multiple ways so far this season. That's the sign of a really good football team. You're not limited to winning in just one way. You can win with your defense. You can also win with your offense. You can win multiple types of games. This defense has been really good so far, only allowing 19 points per game and only 165.8 yards through the air. They've been able to get after the passer. I think Sam Hartman's really good. If you watch that Wake Forest game, the Clemson game last week, that's pretty obvious. 962 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions on the season so far. He is 2-1 in his career against Florida State, but I think this is a different Florida State team. And when you really look at it, Florida State has won 5 straight at home against the Demon Deacons. I think it's going to be I think that Clemson overtime loss has taken the wind out of the sails a little bit of this Wake Forest team, both these teams have a pretty difficult schedule upcoming. I just think this Florida State team, with the athletes that they have up front, will be able to will do a better job than Clemson did last week of getting to Sam Hartman and making him make 1 or 2 mistakes. And this pass defense for Florida State is going to step up big time. And they're going to show the country that they are for real. So I'm going to take Florida State to win at home. I think they're better than people are giving them credit for. But I think I'm going to take Florida State to win. It's a risky proposition, but that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. One thing we learned from last week's game against Clemson is this Wake Forest offense is explosive, super explosive. But on the other hand, I did mention, it's going to be played in Florida where Hurricane Ian is going to be hitting. So it's going to be a wet game, and it's going to play more in the hands of Florida State, in my opinion, because it'll be more reliant on who wins the line of scrimmage, who runs the football better. Not saying Wake Forest can't run the football. They definitely can. I just think the more physical team out of these two is definitely Florida State. And one other thing I'll say is I think Florida State, as you said, they found different ways to win, but they're also they're finding themselves a little bit. I think their rhythm, like the way this team has progressed since that crazy LSU game to start the season, they're like slowly getting to the point where they're limiting those big mistakes that you mentioned. So, with all that being said, though, I do think this is going to be a really close game. I'm going to pick Florida State to win, but I'm going to take Wake Forest to cover that spread of 6.5. I think it'll be around a field goal.
I actually changed my mind. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna take Wake Forest to cover, but Florida State to win. Now that I think about it, I know we've seen that progression from a guy like Jordan Travis, and he's played really well to this point. I just still gotta see more from this Florida State team with respect to the things that I mentioned earlier. How will they respond late in a close game? Are they going to make that key mistake? And this Sam Hartman kid is for real. So I do think that Wake Forest will get up to play this game in an important game. Their coach is fantastic, but I do think Florida State will end up winning. So with that, we should move quickly to our last college football game of the week. Another top 10 matchup, actually. Number 10, NC State, and number 5, Clemson. Clemson favored -6.5 at home after a huge win last week on the road, where DJ Uiagalelei has probably played the best game he's played so far at Clemson, and probably bought himself another couple of weeks to fend off Cade Klubnik, who is a 5-star quarterback waiting in the wings there at Clemson out of Westlake High School. So what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, I think Clemson, they've clearly found themselves offensively. That's the key thing. I think what we've seen from DJU is he's finally found his rhythm as a passer. We really didn't see that at all last year, and that was really the thing that was missing. Last year, their defense was pretty good, and they were able to still win a bunch of close games like you saw last week. But in the shootouts, you got to have your quarterback step up, and he was fantastic in that game. And I think that's going to pay dividends for them moving forward. I think from a confidence standpoint, I think now they're going to be able to hit the ground running. I think they'll be more. I think the coaching staff, even not just DJU, will be more confident in what DJU can do with his arm, his decision making, and his intangibles to control the game more and really open up that playbook and push the ball down the field. So I think this is going to be Clemson's statement game. I feel pretty confident. I'm going to pick Clemson to win and cover, and that's really no shade at NC State, but I just think Clemson. I think they found something in that game against Wake Forest. It's hard to really pinpoint what it was, but there was a different type of rhythm about their offense in that second half, especially. So I'm going to pick Clemson to win here and cover the spread.
I agree with you. This is probably the marquee matchup of the week. It's a top 10 clash, a key game in ACC play already. NC State, of course, winning last year's matchup between these teams. They're trying to win back-to-back games against Clemson for the first time since 2002, 2003. But at Clemson, they have dropped 8 in a row, dating back to 2002. So I don't think, as you said, ending that slide is going to be easy this week against the Clemson offense that, as you said, found itself last week. Now, this NC State defense, I don't think that Wake Forest defense is nearly as good as this NC State defense is. I do think this NC State defense is going to make it difficult. They have a much better and more experienced secondary than Wake Forest has. And they also have some really good athletes up front that we could eventually see playing on Sundays. I mean, they're that good. Their linebackers are really smart, well-coached football team. And Devin Leary at the quarterback position, a guy who had high praise coming into the season, struggled the first couple of weeks, played a really good game. I don't know if it was last week or the week before when they played Texas Tech. I think he'll make some plays as well. and they'll be able to keep this game relatively competitive through about 2.5, 3 quarters. But DJU found it last week. He's looking to continue that momentum. I think this will ultimately come down to that NC State front against this Clemson offensive line. You got to be able to protect DJU, give him time to throw, and let these Clemson receivers go out and make plays. But I do think, given how hard it is to win, especially under the lights at Clemson, I think they're going to continue this momentum. And they're going to try to prove, as you said, right now, it's sort of a toss-up for who that fourth best team in the country is at right now. I mean, you have Georgia, you have Alabama, you have Ohio State, but who is that real fourth best team? Is it Michigan? Is it Clemson? Is it maybe even a team like Tennessee, who's been really good so far? They have some really good victories on their schedule, beating Florida and having a road win at Pittsburgh. I mean, is it USC even? I mean, there are some legitimate contenders for that fourth best team in college football. I think after this weekend, we're going to know that right now it's Clemson. I think it's going to be a statement game. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, I think they're ready to take the next step offensively. Okay, with that, we're going to move into our second segment, which is going to be NFL Panic Meter. So what we're going to do is we have 6 teams selected. Me and Michael both already know the teams we've chosen, and we're just going to put the level of panic and number it on a scale of 1 to 10. How much the fan base should be panicking, how much people within that organization should be panicking, based on expectations, of course. We're just going to discuss all that, starting with, I believe the first team we had was
the Las Vegas Raiders, the only 0-3 team in the NFL.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah. My first knee-jerk reaction when Vegas decided to go with Josh McDaniels was overwhelmingly negative. Obviously, as time went on, I kind of warmed up to it. I kind of convinced myself, okay, maybe second time around as a head coach, he'll kind of steady the ship more this time around, be more personable, be more mature in terms of the leadership role. We all know he's a genius in terms of the X's and O's. He knows the game as well as anybody in this league, Josh McDaniels. But I'm not really questioning him as a coach here, but I just think there's got to be a moment where you got to light a fire under these guys. I mean, the past 2 weeks, these players have kind of come out slow in both of those games, 2 games that you really needed to win. One being a division game against the Chargers, and then, of course, the game last week against the Titans, where you came out slow as well. Getting these big deficits is what's killing this team. I mean, they've been able to move the ball offensively. They haven't been quite as explosive as what I would have thought. They haven't been able to run the ball as well as I would have thought. They've been extremely pass heavy, and the defense has taken a step back as well. So overall, just the panic meter is pretty high, considering not only the division they're in, which is well documented, probably the best division in football going into the season. Obviously, now 3 weeks in, you can kind of question things with maybe the Broncos, kind of question things with the Chargers, whatever the case may be. But being 0-3 in this conference, bottom line, being 0-3 in this conference is going to be an extremely tough hill to climb. And the schedule only gets tougher from here. So I'm going to have the panic meter at, I'd say 8 out of 10.
I'm like an 8.5, 9 out of 10 right now with the Raiders. The bottom line is, right now, it's not a well-coached football team. As you said, the offense, they're obviously really talented on paper. We knew that coming into the season. We knew that when they traded for Devontae Adams. When they're healthy, the offensive line has questions, sure, but at the skill positions, there aren't too many teams that are more talented than the Raiders. It's almost like a stacked fantasy football team. That's really what it is. Darren Waller at the tight end position, Devontae Adams, you bring him in, although he, for some odd reason, has not found his chemistry with Derek Carr yet. He's been sort of in and out of involvement in this offense. You have Josh Jacobs, Hunter Renfrow, and others, but it's been a real struggle for this Raiders offense. They've been able, as you said, they've been able to move the ball inside the 20s. They're actually first in the NFL in red zone trips, meaning they get into the red zone. They're getting into the red zone more than any other team in the NFL. But when they get in the red zone, that's been the issue. They're actually 26 right now in red zone scoring. And on third down, a place that you have to be good in today's NFL, both offensively and defensively, they're not good. They're 22nd, third down offense, only converting 35%. And when you're not converting third downs, it gives your defense less time to rest, and that affects your defense. And also, they're not winning the turnover battle, and they're not getting as much pressure on the quarterback as they did last year with Crosby and the other guys that they have on that defense. You add Chandler Jones. Where's he been? Where's that impact? So I just don't know right now for the Raiders. Their schedule's not going to get any easier. You play the Broncos this week. You have the Chiefs the week after. Even the Jaguars are looking pretty good, pretty damn good so far. We're going to talk about them a little later in our NFL picks. This schedule, as you know, in the NFL, no game is easy per se, but it's brutal. And Josh McDaniels as a head football coach, and I know it's probably unfair to judge him based on his last head coaching tenure, but these are the facts. He's 1-10 in his last 11 games as head football coach of the NFL football team. So unless some of these trends don't change fast, I think it's panic time in Las Vegas.
So you had it as 8.5, and I had it as 8.
Yes.
With that, we'll move on, and the next team we have is the New England Patriots. Currently sitting at 1-2, their one win on the season being against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who we will be talking about later in this segment as well. The offensive coordinator, the joint offensive coordinator experiment with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia has been shaky at times, a little bit with I'd say the sequencing of the plays. They haven't been able to, string plays together to build offensive rhythm. And an offense that was already kind of short on explosive talent to begin with, it's not a good recipe for success. Let's just say that. And the Patriots, we know their defense is going to be solid. We know what the track record that Bill Belichick has in September. He's not historically been a coach that is just going to come out of the gates super hot with the teams he's coached. But this feels different, especially with Mac Jones going down injured. I think the backup right now is Brian Hoyer. It's not the greatest sign, I guess. So I think the panic meter is pretty high, especially since two of the best teams in the league are in your division now, in the Dolphins and the Bills. So I'm gonna say the panic meter is at a 6.5. Not quite as high as the Raiders. I think there's still time to turn this thing around. Their schedule is gettable at certain points of the season, but the biggest thing right now is healthy, getting Mac Jones back healthy, and trying to, you know, um, really lean on your defense and run game a bit more.
Yeah, I think I'm probably about a 7 right now with the Patriots, and it would be lower, but it's just the uncertainty around this Mac Jones injury, who's actually played pretty good football so far, considering the talent that he has on the offensive side. We saw against Pittsburgh, Nelson Aguilar actually stepped up, made some plays, was really good in that game. Obviously, we know they're good on both sides of the football. Stopping the run, they did struggle against Baltimore, but let's be honest, a lot of teams struggle to stop that Baltimore offense. The Dolphins struggled to do it for 3 quarters. That's just a different story up there in Baltimore. But this Patriots offense, they can be generally trusted to be good situationally with a coach like Bill Belichick. And I think with Brian Hoyer, I don't know their schedule upcoming, but it seems to me that they've had one of the tougher schedules in the league so far this season. The Patriots have. You got to play the Ravens. Winning in Pittsburgh still isn't easy, considering. And I forget who they play week 1, and I know they're in a tough. Yeah, the Dolphins. So they've had one of the tougher schedules in the NFL. I think we can say that. And they've found a way to be competitive. They had their chances in that Baltimore game. I think the stability that this coaching staff provides, even though we still have questions about what's happening at the coordinator positions, plus the fact that they're going to be well coached, good situationally, that in itself is going to keep them in games. And I think they're going to find a way to sort of keep themselves competitive and win some games, even with Brian Hoyer at quarterback. And the hope is right now in New England, according to Pro Football Focus, that Mac Jones can come back sooner than originally thought. So it's not a great situation right now in New England, but it's not the worst. Things could be worse. And I do have to give credit to these New England receivers, who I think have played better than I expected coming in. Yeah, I'm not it's not full on panic mode yet right now in New England, but it's certainly cause for concern.
Right. I think the track record with Bill Belichick, like I mentioned earlier, really gives Patriots fans a reason to just have a little bit of patience and let this thing play out and have the team find their rhythm a little bit. I think once the defense finds their footing, probably further into the season, probably around week 6, week 7, that's typically when they play their best defensive football. And right around then, I think they'll be just fine. They'll be right around 500, like we thought they would be in our predictions. So, moving on here, unless you have anything to add.
Nothing to add.
All right, perfect. We'll move it over to your team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who you requested to be in this segment. I didn't originally have them down on my docket for this segment, but you had pointed them out as a team that has a tough schedule moving forward. So go ahead and give your take on the Steelers right now.
Well, right now it's not a great situation. I'll start with the schedule portion. Jets at home this week is a must-win, in my opinion. But beyond that, at the Bills, home against the Buccaneers, they'll probably be healthy at that point. At the undefeated Dolphins, and then at the Eagles. Those 4 teams right there. If I was doing a power ranking right now in the NFL, I think we're going to do one next week once we're about a quarter of the way through the season. Those teams would all be probably in my top 10. And right now, when you look at what's going on in Pittsburgh, Steelers offense, even though we've seen good things, and I'm not going to necessarily pin everything against Mitch Trubisky. I actually think that the people calling for Kenny Pickett right now are a little bit overstepping their boundary. I do not think Mitch Trubisky is near the problem, near the biggest problem this Steelers offense has right now. He is just at points and times. It's not that he's playing bad football. He's just missing sometimes the open receivers. And I think given he's learning a new offense, given some of the inconsistencies with the offensive line, who's actually been pretty good to this point, as we spoke about either last week or the week before. And, with learning some of these new receivers, getting chemistry down with these younger receivers, it's just going to take a little time for Trubisky to find that comfortability. So I don't think this is near on Trubisky, near as much as people in Pittsburgh or Steelers fans seem to think it is. Yes, sure. I mean, you draft Kenny Pickett number 20 overall. You'd like to see him play if this continues. Of course, I agree with that. But it's way too early right now to even consider that. And I personally don't think this is the right time. Because if you throw Pickett in now, you're asking him to go on the road 3 out of the next 4 games after this week to play Josh Allen, to play Tua, who's firing on all cylinders right now, and Jalen Hurts, who, if I had to say right now, might be the front runner for the National Football League MVP. And not to mention, go against the greatest of all time in Tom Brady. So I know that was a little spiel on the quarterback. I think it's too early to call for Pickett. But the bottom line with the Steelers offense is, though we've seen some good things, and man, as we spoke about during the preseason, I think this George Pickens kid is still going to be a star. The catch that he made last week on Thursday night was unreal. You've seen flashes of his talent. And the running game has been getting a little better each week. But right now, they're second most 3-and-outs in the league. That's wearing out on the defense. They have an extremely tough schedule upcoming. They're not winning time of possession. They've lost time of possession in all 3 games that they've played in, and it's not even remotely close. And that's wearing out their defense, as we saw last week in Cleveland, and as was the case the week before against New England. They had a chance to win that game. Cam Sutton drops an interception that probably, if he catches that, would have won the Steelers the game at the end of the day. But those last 6 minutes, New England ran out the clock. There was some mismanagement of the clock by Tomlin, but Steelers couldn't stop the run. And it's not because they don't have the guys to do it. It's because they had been on the field all freaking day long. And that offense just can't sustain drives. It's been way too inconsistent. And this defense without TJ Watt, it's a totally different defense. Look, Alex Highsmith's been really good so far. He actually leads the league individually in sacks right now, 4.5. But nobody else can generate any sort of pressure outside of occasionally Cam Hayward. And they generate pressure nowadays. They're not creating those splash plays that they were when TJ Watt was, healthy week 1. Now, the good news is TJ Watt is going to come back sooner than people think. I think he could even come back as soon as the next 2 weeks. He actually did a full practice today. He's a superhuman. He's going to be back soon, and hopefully that helps. And I do have faith. I still, until proven otherwise, I have faith that Tomlin, somehow, some way, is going to keep this team afloat. And they've been competitive, the first 3 weeks of the season. So my panic meter isn't necessarily super high. I'd say right now it's about a 6.5, 7. Just because of the inconsistency on offense, the inability to sustain drives and not even win time of possession, but make it competitive and give your defense some rest at least. And then obviously missing TJ Watt, you have not won a game under Tomlin without TJ Watt, or even a game where he plays, less than 50% of the snaps. In the secondary, when the defense doesn't get pressure, you can poke holes in this secondary as long as you throw away from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So I don't know, man. It's just a lot of different things that they have to figure out how to put together. And if they do, I mean, we'll see. But I just think with the schedule, this offense's inability, it's not that they can't, move the ball and they're not talented, but they just haven't shown the ability to sustain drives. And you can't put that constant pressure on this defense, especially without TJ Watt. And this schedule is brutal. So, I mean, right now, I think if the Steelers go 2-3 over the next 5 games, Tomlin's got to be a candidate for Coach of the Year. I'll say it right now.
Yeah, I think some of the requests to put in Kenny Pickett, it's not an indictment on Mitch Trubisky. I think it's more so questioning what the priorities are. I think in terms of the style of quarterback Kenny Pickett is and where he's at, oh my goodness, and where he's at in his career. For you audio listeners, my camera just fell down for the third time this podcast. That's annoying. Anyways, where Kenny Pickett is at in his career, he was slated as a more NFL-ready guy than some of the other players in this quarterback class. And I think with that being said, I think getting him in and getting him in some experience is, I don't think it would be a bad thing at this point. And I just, I question what the point of keeping Mitch Trubisky in there is. I'd understand if you took Malik Willis and you wanted to, sit him for a year. He's a raw guy. He needs to sit, learn the offense, learn how to be good in the NFL. But with Pickett, that's not really the case, and I wonder about that a little bit. But just in terms of where this team is at, this defense is still going to be good. I'm not worried about that defense at all. Even without TJ Watt, I think they're going to need a couple other guys to step up, sure. But I think, this pass rush, even without TJ Watt, is far from the worst in the league. I think at worst, they're average without TJ Watt. So if you're looking at this positively, I think you got the Steelers will be competitive and they'll be in a lot of close games. And I think with y'all's running game and what the offensive line has shown, I think there's a lot of positives to take out of the first 3 games as well. So I'm going to say the panic meter is at a 4 or a 3. But if you talk to me in say 4 weeks and they lost all 4 of those games, then we'll talk. Then it'll be up to 8 or 9.
Well, I think if they lose the next 2 games, it's up to an 8 or a 9. I mean, trying to get out of a 1-4 hole in the AFC is not going to be a fun thing to try to do, especially during that schedule. Isn't going to get any easier. And if you lose to the Jets at home, well, that's a whole other story. But anyways, we'll move on. Who is our next team on the list?
Next team is the Arizona Cardinals. Currently 1-2. Their one win this season was the crazy comeback against the Raiders, of course, in week 2 at home. And the defense has not been good, and the offense has been extremely erratic, to say the least. They've been kind of struggling to get a lot of consistent wide receiver production out of Marquise Brown. They've been looking more towards Greg Dortch, which is fine, but with what they gave up to bring in Marquise Brown, you'd expect more from him than what you're getting right now. And on top of that, I just think Kyler Murray looks extremely uncomfortable in structure this season. I don't know what it is about um, what he's seeing in the pocket, or rather what he's not seeing, but he's not really able to, make plays as they're intended, if that makes sense. 3-step drop, check your first and second option, fire. You know, he's more so just dropping back, kind of with running in the back of his head and trying to get out of the pocket and make plays. And sometimes it works, but you in the NFL, in order to have any type of consistent success, you have to be able to make plays in the pocket, and that's what's kind of missing for Kyler Murray right now. And it's a little bit head scratching because he was making those plays to start last season. That's why he was in the MVP race. So I don't know what the disconnect is. I don't know what's missing, but he's got to make that adjustment. Another thing is this defense. Their best pass rusher is J.J. Watt at 34 years old, and that just simply doesn't cut it. As good as what they had hopes for in these linebackers, and Isaiah Simmons, and what's his name, kid they took out of Tulsa last year, the other linebacker. As high of hopes as they had for those two linebackers, if you can't get any pressure on the quarterback, or hold the line of scrimmage at all in the run game, then you just put way too much pressure on these linebackers, and it makes you susceptible to any type of play action because they just have to bite on anything. They just have to bite on everything just to keep the opposing run game under wraps. So it's just a lot of pressure on those linebackers because of how squishy that defensive line is, and the offense doesn't look that great either. So it's not good right now. I think the panic meter is I think it's at a 9. I'd say it's the highest out of
Wow.
these teams, just how they've looked, and considering the arc that Cliff Kingsbury's time in Arizona has taken. This is not a good situation. Um, you would hope that Cliff Kingsbury could come into the season with adjustments to what he saw to close the season last year, but that hasn't seemed to be the case, and it seems like Kyler Murray has taken a step back in terms of um, playing in structure, and especially since they just paid him 40 million a year contract. Maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, but I think Kingsbury will most likely be fired by week 8. That's my prediction.
Wow, I heavily disagree with that. First of all, the schedule, there are winnable games coming up. I mean, the Panthers, that's certainly a winnable game for Kyler Murray. The Eagles, certainly the next week, that's going to be tough, but at least you get it at home. Anything can happen on any given Sunday in the NFL. And then after that, you're getting DeAndre Hopkins back. I mean, you can't ignore that. And then your schedule really lightens up. Seahawks, the Saints certainly haven't been anything to, sneeze at the first couple of weeks. You could win that game. And then the Vikings, they always seem to find themselves in close games. That certainly is, I'm not saying any of these games are going to be easy, but it's not like the Cardinals can't, with Kyler Murray, with DeAndre Hopkins coming back and some of these weapons that he has. We've seen Marquise Brown play well the first couple of weeks. They have Zach Ertz. As long as he can stay healthy, I think you're going to see the Cardinals be able to win some of these games. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is going to be fired by week 8. I actually foresee them winning probably at least going 500 over the next 5 or 6 weeks. And I think that'll be good enough for Kingsbury to keep his job. Now, my question with Kingsbury always comes down to what's going to happen in November and December. We talked about this, in our season preview. This has been a problem for the Cardinals the past couple of years under Cliff Kingsbury and his tenure. And while the defense, hasn't been great so far, it's not like that. I mean, the Chiefs week 1, that was abysmal, but that was week 1. A lot of crazy things happened week 1. It's sort of like an extended preseason, in my opinion. And that Chiefs offense is obviously really good, as we've seen. And then the Raiders, I mean, that was just, yes, if they don't get those turnovers, that was a toss-up game. They certainly could have lost that game, and they could be 0-3 at this point, and maybe I'd be speaking a different tune. But, I mean, what are you going to do? You found a way to win. Kyler Murray made an insane couple throws there, insane couple plays, found a way to pull a win out of his hat. You got the turnovers that you needed. The Raiders lost the game. You took advantage. Congratulations, you won. And then the last week against the Rams, I know this Rams offense hasn't necessarily been anything close to what we've expected it to be the first couple of weeks. But I didn't think the Cardinals' defense was all that bad. I just think it comes down to some of the situational things late in games. But I think still, with a quarterback like Kyler Murray that can make plays, with a running game that's certainly decent with James Conner and the other backs that they have, with Hopkins coming back, I don't think you can ignore that after the next couple of weeks. And, the schedule not being – certainly there's no game on the schedule aside from maybe that Eagles game that I don't think they could win the way that they're playing. I think Kingsbury will keep his job until at least the end of the season. I don't think, even with your struggles, you want to fire coach midseason at this point. And looking at the landscape of the NFC, I mean, outside of maybe the Rams, the Buccaneers, Packers, Vikings, I still think you have a decent chance at competing for a wild card spot. So I'm not saying things are perfect right now in Arizona. They're certainly far from perfect, but I heavily disagree. I think it's more just looking at the schedule and what they have coming back here pretty soon based on, the schedule that they've had. I think I'd say it's more like a 5, maybe a 6, but I'm certainly not counting the Cardinals out right now.
Okay, yeah, I will backtrack a little bit. I think I failed to acknowledge that DeAndre Hopkins is coming back. That will definitely make a difference. But I think the reason I did go that high is also because of the track record with Cliff Kingsbury in November and December, and the fact that he's not really getting off to a good start. And also, they are playing the AFC West, and some of those teams that they play, with the Vikings, with the running game they have, I think teams will find a way to exploit some of those issues with that defensive line. I think that's the concerning part with that defense. I think their secondary is fine. I like some of the guys they have at the cornerback position, and obviously at safety you have
Buda Baker.
Buda Baker, of course. So I'll backtrack a little bit. I'm going to move it down to like a 7.5. But I haven't liked what I've seen from Kyler Murray. That's mostly why I had the original number at 9. But that, in hindsight, that does seem like a little bit much. Okay, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, a team within that division, also at 1-2, but in a very different way. Um, their week 1 game against the Bears in a monsoon, with Trey Lance, didn't go as planned. Um, the defense still has looked fine, did look fine in that game, but they weren't able to make the plays offensively to pull that out. And then, obviously, Sunday night, against Denver, in Denver, that didn't go as planned either. Only putting up 10 points, really struggling to move the ball as well, giving up a safety. It really just comes down to the offense. But here's another key point I want to make, and here's a reason why, if you're a Niners fan, you should still feel somewhat optimistic. It's the fact that Jimmy G hasn't had reps with this offense at all. He was expected to be traded for most of this offseason, and even before that, he had shoulder surgery, so he wasn't getting any type of reps, any type of first team reps, any type of second team reps even. He was away from the team, training on his own. So the chemistry was a little off, the rhythm was a little bit off. But I think as the season rolls along, um, I think you'll see this offense really progress. Um, One thing I will say is the offensive line situation right now is concerning with the injuries they have. On the interior, they're relying on some young players, and then of course at left tackle, losing a guy like Trent Williams, who is arguably the best tackle in football, is not ideal, especially since um, you have Jimmy G now and not Trey Lance, a guy who was mobile and could get away from some of the pressure that problem may present. So I am optimistic still. This defense is still fantastic. I just think you got to get healthy offensively first and foremost. That offensive line has to get healthy, and you got to just continue to lean on this run game, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm not all that concerned with a stable franchise, a really good head coach, Kyle Shanahan, solid running game. The offensive line in some areas is concerning. And Jimmy G, I mean, the main area he struggled to this point has been on third downs. They haven't been great on third downs, as they talked about earlier with a couple other teams. But, I think just give them a couple weeks. And I do think this 49ers is going to find ways to win games. This defense is pretty good. I really don't have much to say. I'm a little bit concerned. This upcoming game, the Sunday night game, or Monday game, excuse me, that we're going to pick to conclude the pod against the Rams. But after that, the schedule lightens up just a tad. The Panthers, the Falcons, and then you're sort of back at it. The Chiefs and the Rams again. I do think as long as you can find a way to win some of those tougher games, which I think they will. The Chiefs are at home. One of those Rams games is at home, and then they also get the Chargers at home a couple weeks after that. I do think, the struggles that we've seen from this Rams offense, the struggles that we just mentioned with the Cardinals, and then the Seahawks obviously not being all that great this year. I don't think there's much reason for panic. Maybe a little bit of concern right now, but I think it's pretty low. I think it's the lowest of the team that we've talked about this far.
Yeah, I agree. If I'm going to put a number up on it, I'd say probably a 2. Nothing
2
too
or
crazy.
3.
Yeah, I think considering even last year they were in a bit of a hole. I think they were, I want to say, like 3-5. coming out of Week 8. So not anything they haven't been through before, and they have a lot of years under their belt with Jimmy G under center. So I think the ship will steady itself as time goes on. Okay, I think since some of these segments have gone on a little bit longer, I think we can cut out this last team and just have it
Yeah.
be 5 for this segment, and we'll get into our NFL picks here. Um, Starting with the Thursday night game, Miami at Cincinnati. Cincinnati favored -3.5.
It's funny because the Dolphins last week only had 212 yards of total offense, and they were outgained. The Bills 497 yards of total offense. However, the Bills only scored, I don't know, what was it, 19 points, and one of them was on a butt punt, or two of those points came on a butt punt, which I thought was hilarious. Originally, I thought it was blocked, but then I saw the replay, and it hit the guy's butt, which I thought was hilarious. Anywho, the Dolphins are actually the only team, well, technically this is the second time it's happened in the past 16 years, but they're the only team in the past 16 years to win a football game in the NFL when being outgained by 275 yards. In the past 16 years, teams that are outgained, by that much, by more than 275 yards, are 2-108 as a win-loss record. And both wins actually happened to be the Dolphins. 2020, it happened with the Dolphins and Tua in a game against the Rams. And then just last week against the Bills, it happened, and they found a way to win that game. So maybe a coincidental stat in some respects, but they found ways to win games. Look, through 3 weeks, the Dolphins are giving up 413 yards per game defensively. That's the second most in the NFL. You can certainly move the ball on this defense, although it does get a little tougher to score on them in the red zone. I think with some of the struggles that we've seen with the Bengals, it's been when they've gotten down there in the red zone, but I think they were able to get sort of the schneid off their back last week in the game against the Jets. And I think Joe Burrow, it's a short week coming off a really emotional, physically, wear and tear divisional game last week for the Dolphins. Tua's health is uncertain at this point. He's listed as questionable to play tomorrow. I know the Dolphins are a really good football team. I think we can say that. But going on the road to Cincinnati on a short week after everything that happened last week, I just think Cincinnati's going to come ready to play, and they're going to win this game. I'm going to take them to win and cover. But I don't feel all that confident about that if Tua is healthy and he plays.
Yeah, the Tua situation is up in the air right now. I don't know how to feel if Teddy Bridgewater's in there. I wouldn't feel too confident picking the Dolphins, that's for sure. And as a guy who was really doubting Tua coming into this year, he has thoroughly impressed me time and time again. One of the things that I had criticized Tua for a bit was his, I guess, conservatism, in terms of decision making.
Yeah.
He always, he never really had like the highest depth of target, which you wouldn't really expect him to with the type of quarterback he is. But I think some of those intermediate throws down the field, he's really leaned into that part of his game that we saw at Alabama that he was so good at. Those throws from 10 to 25 yards down the field. He's been pinpoint accurate, and he's shown anticipation with his throws as well. I think this Dolphins defense is fantastic also. I think one of the most underrated parts about this defense, everybody really talks about that secondary. Obviously, that secondary is fantastic. but that pass rush has been really good also. The addition of Ingram, the Emmanuel Ogba, all those guys on that D line have consistently gotten pressure on the quarterback, and to me, I think that's where I give the edge to the Miami the most here. Um, I think this will be a relatively low scoring game. And I'm gonna pick the Dolphins here. I'm gonna pick the Dolphins to win outright.
Wow.
It really depends on if Tua plays. Um, if Tua doesn't play, then you could throw this pick out the window. But with Tua in there, I just think they have it clicking right now, and they're extremely confident. Um, I could be wrong, but I think Cincinnati still has some things to figure out defensively. Just work out some of the kinks and crannies in that defense. Um, I think I messed up that saying, but you get the point.
Yeah, for sure. And look, as I said, I'm not all that confident in my pick if Tua ends up playing. However, I just think, and I've seen this happen again and again in the NFL, this is sort of the way that it goes most of the time. On a short week after a tough divisional win, going to a team that's yet to that's ready to, I think, break out. And I even forgot about the issues Cincinnati has had on the offensive line so far, and that could certainly come back to haunt them. If Miami creates a good amount of pressure like Pittsburgh was able to, or like forget who Cincinnati play. Oh yeah, Dallas, week 2. That could be a problem. But I just think Cincinnati's going to be able to move the ball, and I just see them winning a game at home. Maybe it's not by 3.5. Maybe I lose the spread, but we'll see. Thursday night games are always, I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
With
they're
that, we'll
always
move on.
harder to pick. Right. Yeah, we'll move on here to the London game, first London game of the season, between the Vikings, favored -2.5, taking on the New Orleans Saints, coming off a loss against the Carolina Panthers, where Jameis Winston looked questionable at certain points in the game. He is injured. He does have a back injury. I don't know the details in terms of the medical side of things, but it is a back injury, and he has been playing through the pain. But I don't like where the Saints offense is at. It's not all on Jameis Winston. They haven't ran the ball well as well. On top of some of their struggles throwing the ball, but I think the amount of pass attempts and the amount of you know the amount of responsibility they're putting on Jameis Winston's shoulder is a little bit reminiscent to his Tampa Bay days, which is not a good sign. The whole, idea of Jameis Winston's, revitalization of his career is the idea that he wouldn't have to shoulder too much of a load. He could rely on this defense to make plays, be smart with the football, maybe even become more of a game manager type. But this year, he's gone right back to, gunslinging Jameis Winston. And, you know, it has its good moments, obviously, but um, if you want to win games, that's not the style of football you want to be playing. So I'm gonna pick the Vikings here. I'm gonna pick them to cover, and I'll say the final score will be 23-17.
I agree with you. I think the Vikings will win and cover. This game's obviously in London, so you never know what to expect. But I think I saw something last week in the Vikings that I needed to see, and that was they were able, when faced with adversity, they were able to overcome it. And I do think the Lions are a better football team than the general public is giving them credit for. And so I certainly don't think, being down to Detroit, the way how hard they play and with some of the redeeming qualities of their football team was a bad thing. But they were able to win a close game, and that's something that we talked about. The failure to do that last year, maybe they can do that this year. I think Kevin O'Connell's made a difference, and as long as the Vikings, I think, win the turnover battle, which I think could be a huge deciding factor here in this game, and as long as that pass rush can continue to get after the quarterback with Zadarius Smith, who's already made his impact, Daniil Hunter, and others, I like the Vikings' chances with all the weapons that they have. So I'm going to pick the Vikings. I think I agree with you. I think they win 7 to 10 points. I just can't. I don't have all that much confidence in this Saints offense right now. Yeah. Although their defense has been playing pretty difficult.
Yeah, the defense has lived up to the expectations for sure. Okay, moving on to the game of the week. No question. The Bills going to Baltimore, playing in M&T Bank Stadium, take on the Baltimore Ravens. Red hot Lamar Jackson against the consensus, I'd say, best quarterback in football right now in Josh Allen. Bills favored -3.5. What are you thinking?
Wow. This game, you're talking about Lamar Jackson, who has he's leading the league in touchdowns. He's actually 5th right now in the NFL in rushing yards by anybody, not just quarterbacks, running backs too. He's 5th in the NFL in rushing yards. He's 1st in passer rating. He's got more touchdowns than I believe 30 of the 32 NFL teams do through 3 weeks. He's on a historical pace. I think I saw earlier that he's on pace to score 64 touchdowns through the air and on the ground so far this season. Obviously, that pace probably won't sustain itself throughout the course of a long football season, but it's just ridiculous how high a level of football he is playing. My concern right now for the Ravens is, and give them credit, when they needed to make plays last week on defense, they did. And Kyle Hamilton, the rookie out of Notre Dame, made a huge strip on a first down catch by, I forget who it was, but he came from behind and made a huge strip. They got the turnover that they needed, and they made plays when they had to. But obviously losing Wink Martindale as defensive coordinator, I think has had a little bit of an impact on this Baltimore team. And I think, the secondary is a concern up until this point. They're giving up, where's the stat? 353 average passing yards per game through the first 3 weeks. It's been brutal through the air. That's last in the NFL. Not only is that last in the NFL, it's actually no other team in the NFL at this point is giving up more than an average of 300 passing yards per game. And they're giving up 353 passing yards per game. And they haven't exactly faced, murderer's row at quarterback. They faced Mac Jones with his limited weapons. They faced Joe Flacco, and they faced Tua Tagovailoa. And now they got to face Josh Allen. So am I confident that they can stop the Bills? No, I'm not, unless they're able to generate pressure. But on the other side, I have to acknowledge the fact that this Ravens team, they're well coached. Lamar Jackson is a different animal. I believe they got Dobbins back last week, did they not? So that obviously helps. And then this receiving core guys are stepping up and making plays. Rashad Bateman's making plays. Devin Duvernay's making plays. Obviously, we know what the challenge that Mark Andrew presents from a tight end perspective. And they can run the football and control time of possession. So I do think it's going to be a close game, even though the Ravens secondary, for whatever reason, cannot seem to cover to save their lives. But I just think, and I've said this since the beginning of the season, that the Bills at full strength, even though that they've losing your safeties and not having your guys in that secondary is obviously a concern. But I think they're going to get some of their cornerbacks healthy here in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if it's going to be this week or next week, but I like some of the young players that are being given the opportunity in their secondary. And I just think Josh Allen, when given the chance, is going to find ways to make plays with this offense against the Baltimore secondary that just hasn't been good so far. I'm going to take Buffalo to win. What is the line? It's 3.5 Buffalo.
Half.
But I do think it's going to be close. And the game's in Baltimore. So I think I'm going to take Baltimore to cover.
Okay, yeah. This one's really tough. Lamar Jackson has been incredible so far this year, to say the least. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen him so comfortable, just in control of the game in every way, looking off coverage, full command of the offense. He's been great. But as good as he has been, Josh Allen has been just as good, if not better. And, you know, this Bills secondary right now, obviously with the loss of Jordan Poyer, that really hurts. They're a little bit beat up in the secondary right now. And I think they're going to have to lean on this pass rush a little bit more. I think they'll have to blitz a little bit more, possibly in this game. Man, this is so tough. One thing I will point out is the Bills are 0-6 in their last 6 games, going back to last season, in games decided by one score or less. And last week they had every chance to win that game, over and over and over again. Obviously, Josh Allen had that missed throw for the go-ahead touchdown, and then a few minutes later, after they got that safety, they had a chance to drive down and get the field goal. They had a clock management issue. I don't know, man. I'm going to go with my gut here. I'm going to pick the upset. I'm going to pick the Ravens to win. I don't feel great about it, but I just think this one's going to be a shootout. And I like that the Ravens are balanced offensively. I don't like how, pass heavy this Bills team has been. They might, look to run the ball more this week, but that's yet to be seen. I don't necessarily think the Ravens are the better football team. I just think being at home and also the momentum that Lamar Jackson has right now, I think will contribute to them pulling out this win.
Yeah, I certainly think it'll be close too. I think I have Baltimore covering the spread, but I just think, this is like 2 MVPs going at it early season. We never know what's going to happen, so we'll see what happens. Moving on, we're about 1/3. We have 3 games left that we're going to pick. We'll roll through these, and then we'll wrap this thing up. We put this game in here primarily because, number one, the Eagles have looked really, really good so far. Number two, so have the Jaguars, actually. It is Jacksonville at Philadelphia. Philly minus 6.5. What are you feeling?
I think the Jaguars are legit. If you look at, MyBookie and all the sports betting apps. The Jaguars are plus 230 to win their division. Definitely, keep an eye on that. Um, but this game, I think this Jaguars offense, I like how creative they've been. I like that they've been spreading the ball around. Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, and Christian Kirk have had a pretty even share in the targets. They've gotten their tight end Evan Ingram involved. I think this offense has been extremely balanced, and their run game has brought a physical attitude that they just have not had in the past. Like even in the year where they were really good, and they had that running game with Leonard Fournette, their offensive line wasn't bullying people like they were last week against the Chargers. And the Chargers were a little bit demoralized. We get it. They had a lot of injuries, yada yada yada. But we covered this before the season started. That Chargers defensive line, they focused on it all off season. They signed free agents, they drafted, and the Jaguars bullied them 4 quarters straight. Um, just absolutely bullied them. I don't think they'll be bullying the Eagles, but I think they'll be holding their own, definitely. Um, I think the Eagles will ultimately win this game, um, just because I think this Eagles offense presents something completely different from what the Jaguars have faced so far this season defensively. But I do think the Jaguars will cover the spread here, and I think it'll be a close game. Um, I think this is. Um, I think the outlook after this game will be positive for the Jaguars, even if they lose.
I 100% agree with you. This is what I'm calling the Doug Peterson revenge game. Obviously, Peterson was fired in 2020 uh, as head coach of the Eagles after a 4-11 tough year where there was controversy between him and Carson Wentz. And a lot of things went wrong that year. But of course, now the Eagles are looking like one of the better teams in the National Football League, balanced on both sides of the ball. Jalen Hurts has taken another step. They have weapons. They're just playing really good football right now. Complimentary on both sides of the ball, but so are the Jaguars. Now, what worries me is Jacksonville. They're 1-18 in their last 19 games on the road, and that one win was last week. And also, this is just sort of funny. Doug Peterson has already tied Urban Meyer for the 5th all-time in wins by Jaguars coach with 2. That's kind of funny. But no, I think really just cutting to the chase here. For the first time in his NFL career, and it's early, Trevor Lawrence, like he had in high school, like he had at Clemson, under an established coach with really good players around him, he's playing under structure. And give a really talented guy like him some structure for the first time in his career, and he's going to win you football games. Christian Kirk has, up until this point, lived up to that big contract he signed in the offseason. Obviously, the running game with Robinson and ETN has been fairly effective. The offensive line's been good. Giving Trevor Lawrence time to throw, he's making good decisions. And when they're getting in the red zone, they're punching the ball into the end zone. So in this defense, they're nothing to sneeze at. They got some athletes up front. The draft pick of Trayvon Walker is paying off big time. And they're obviously well coached in that secondary, as we've seen so far. Only giving up 10 on the road. I know Justin Herbert was banged up and Keenan Allen and some other guys are hurt, but it was a really good performance. I was really impressed by what I saw from the Jaguars. And I agree with you. I think they're going to be hanging around actually 500 most of the season. And who knows, but that division, I think they're the leader in the clubhouse at this point in that division. I think you'd have to say that with the level of talent they have at the quarterback position and the complementary football that they're playing. I'm going to take Jacksonville to cover, but I think Philly will ultimately find a way to win. So I do agree with you.
Okay. Okay, moving right along here. Okay, yeah, this one has been well advertised. You've been following the NFL. This is a big one. Kansas City Chiefs going into Tennessee they're playing in Minnesota. Excuse me, going into Minnesota to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have relocated temporarily due to Hurricane Ian. The Chiefs are favored -2.5. What are you thinking right here?
Has it been? Did they announce it's been permanently relocated? Because the last time I saw, the game was still scheduled to be played in Tampa Bay.
I think I did see it on ESPN, but I would have to double check it.
Well, either way, I don't think it changes all that much.
Right.
At the end of the day, obviously, I think what this really comes down to is the health of the weapons at the disposal of Tom Brady. Obviously, there are some questions with that offensive line, especially on the interior. It hasn't been all that great to this point. They have been able to run the football relatively effectively, but I just think the Chiefs, under Andy Reid, they're really good coming off a loss. That was a tough loss last week. And they probably shouldn't have lost in Indianapolis. Juju had a big game. I think they're finding their way offensively. Andy Reid, once again, really good off a loss. And I just don't know the status of a lot of these guys offensively for the Buccaneers. We've seen Brady's team sort of get off to shaky starts in September, and if they're 2-2 after this week with a loss to the Chiefs, and I forget a loss to the who did they lose to last week?
Packers.
The Packers. I mean, losing to Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, obviously, that's tough. But I do think the Chiefs are going to rebound off a tough loss last week, given that I think they're the more healthy team at this moment in time. But that's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I agree here. Tampa Bay, I don't want to rule out Tom Brady, somehow, feeding Cole Beasley, the carcass of what's left of Cole Beasley somehow, some way, and pulling out this win. But I just find that really hard to believe, given what this Kansas City team has shown, especially defensively. And also, you mentioned the injuries on that offensive line on the interior. Well, guess who has the second best interior defensive lineman in football? The Chiefs, Chris Jones. So that doesn't bode well for Tom Brady. And on top of that, the last time these two teams played, Kansas City was a entirely different football team. They lacked, interior strength, like on both sides of the ball. Like the offensive line was fine, the defensive line was fine, but they weren't really controlling. They weren't really dictating the line of scrimmage, and that's completely different from where they're at now, where the interior of that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line might be the best in football. Week to week, you could really argue that. So it's an entirely different football team. I think they're built to beat the team like the Bucs, even if they were healthy. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs here to win and cover. And my gut is kind of telling me to pick this as a lock of the week, but I'm going to leave it up in the air for now. We'll just move right along.
Fair enough. Our last game is the Monday night game, and I think we've picked – this is our third week of our picks podcast. I think we've picked the Monday night game all 3 weeks, so credit to us for that. The Monday night schedule is loaded this year. We have a divisional matchup. These are always hard to predict. The Rams, who've had some inconsistency offensively up to this point, but are still, I think, a really good roster and a really good. The same with San Francisco on the other end. So it's right now San Francisco -2.5 at home against the Rams team that's found ways to win, but hasn't looked great in the process. What do you think?
Man, it's hard to really say. The Rams, got smacked week one, but it's week one. That's, a lot of crazy stuff happens in week one. They looked better these last couple of weeks, obviously getting wins against the Falcons and the Cardinals, respectively. But this 49ers defense is a different challenge. I think the 49ers are overall the better football team. It just comes down to Jimmy G and where he's at with these in terms of chemistry with these wide receivers. What we saw last week, it wasn't good. And we discussed this in the panic meter segment. I'm not worried about this team long term, but in the short term, in a game like this, Jimmy G has to be better. He has to find a way to find himself a little bit within his offense, and I think ultimately he will. I think there's probably going to be shaky moments here and there. Um, the most common thing we see with Jimmy G is his struggle to read the middle of the field. He often, misreads where linebackers are at, and a linebacker will just pluck his slant throw from underneath, and he won't even see it coming. And with the linebacker core the Rams have, with Bobby Wagner in there, I think I could see that happening once or twice this game. And I think it'll be a extremely close game. I'm going to pick the 49ers to win, but I'm going to pick the Rams to cover. Just because the 49ers are at home and they've had the Rams number in the regular season these past few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Niners will win the football game. I'm struggling on who to pick to cover, but I think the key for San Francisco is going to be obviously staying on schedule, meaning staying ahead of the chains and moving the chains when needed on third down. That was the area they, as I said, really struggled with and have not been great over the past couple of years with Jimmy G at quarterback. It's been kind of, I wouldn't say an Achilles heel, but it certainly hasn't been their strength. 2017, 16th in third down percentage. 2018, 18th in third down percentage. They had a really good year, 2019, 45%. That was fifth in the league at the time. But the past couple of years, 24th, 15th, and then so far this year, 20th on third down. It's not great on third down. I think, especially against a pass rush like Los Angeles, a team that can get after Jimmy G and make it uncomfortable for him. I think, given some of the concerns that we talked about with the San Francisco offensive line, that could be a problem if you're not able to stay on schedule, stay in third and manageable, stay in third and short, get that running game going. Because this San Francisco offense, as we know, it works best when the running game is working and they're able to work the play action off the run game. So it's a divisional game. It's really hard to predict. We've seen, obviously, the Rams struggle to sort of get their footing offensively, and it's not going to get any easier going on the road to face a divisional opponent who probably needs this game just as much as the Rams do, especially since it's in division. And even though if they were to fall to 1-3, I wouldn't be all that worried as I would with some other teams in the league. But you certainly don't want to fall to 1-3. And it's on the road, and the San Francisco defense is really good. it's going to be a 50-50 game, but I think the 49ers will find a way to win it. And I think it's going to be by a field goal. And just by that, I think that if that happens, it covers the spread. So I don't know. I don't feel great about it. Sean McVay in a big spot has usually been pretty damn good. But I just feel like the Niners will find a way to win. And this division is going to be – I think these two teams are going to be sort of neck and neck going down the stretch. It's going to take them a while to sort of sort things out in the NFC West. So I see San Francisco winning and covering, but it's only because I see them winning on maybe a last-second field goal, something along those lines.
Yeah. That one was really tough. Okay, now we got to pick our locks of the week. One thing I will do, though, is I do want to go back and change one of my picks. I've thought about this one a little bit in hindsight. The Dolphins-Bengals game, I'm going to change my pick. I'm going to say the Bengals win and the Dolphins cover. I think Joe Burrow will be the difference there. I think the Dolphins, left the door open. And we discussed that when we were talking about the Bills. They left the door open a lot in that fourth quarter. They gave the Bills a lot of chances to win. And I think Joe Burrow, if put in that situation, will take advantage of that, especially with the urgency that the Bengals will have being 1-2.
Okay, so what is my lock of the week? I'll just go ahead and say it. It's actually not going to be an NFL game this week. I'm actually going to go to the college ranks. And I feel really confident about this Clemson pick. It is a little risky considering that, it's a 6.5 point spread, but they are at home. As we said earlier, feel pretty confident about where DJU is at considering his performance last week. This NC State defense is good, as I mentioned earlier, but they have not seen a team like Clemson yet. This is their first real test. I mean, close win against whoever it was week 1. I forget who it was. I think it was East Carolina. They barely pulled that game out of their ass. Then, they struggled. Not necessarily struggled, but that Texas Tech game was probably closer than it should have been. They really struggled to put Texas Tech away until late in the game. And then they had another relatively close game a couple weeks ago against not very good teams. So, I don't know. I just feel pretty confident about Dabo Swinney and this team getting up for this game. I think the defense, after sort of a poor performance last week against Wake Forest, really good Wake Forest offense, albeit, but I think this defense is going to find a way to play a lot better. And I feel really confident about Clemson winning and covering on Saturday night. So I'm going to make Clemson the first ever college lock of the week here on the Raw Prospect Podcast.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty bold. I like it though. I think that's a good pick. That was definitely one that we were both pretty confident on. But for my lock of the week, I'm going to pick the Jaguars to cover that spread against the Eagles. That 6.5 point spread does feel a little bit big for me. I know that's a little bit risky given how hot the Eagles have been these last few weeks, but I think the Jaguars could catch them off guard a little bit. And another key thing to mention too is the Eagles haven't really been able to generate offense in the second halves of these games. So if the Jaguars get the game to the fourth quarter in a close game, I think they'll have a really good chance to cover. But one thing, just to clarify what locks of the week is, it just means that the game that we choose will be worth 2 wins or 2 losses. So It's just the game that we feel most confident on for the week, and it'll go on our win-loss record against the spread in our little competition we have worth 2 games. So that makes it that much more important.
Yeah, and so far, and I think the same thing happened last year. I can go back and look at our pick spreadsheet from last year. We have not hit a lock of the week yet. So that's kind of killed us because, as Emmy said, it's worth 2 points either way. If you win it, you get 2 points. If you lose it, it goes against you 2 points. It's 2 losses. So, yeah, but we started to gain our footing last year at about this point in time. After a couple weeks, we sort of figured it out, and I think we'll eventually figure this thing out. Those are some risky locks of the week on both sides, but look, you got to take risks sometimes. So,
Yeah.
But with that, I think that's going to do it. Long episode. We'll try to put timestamps, maybe break this up a little bit to make it more digestible for y'all. We will be back tomorrow for an NBA episode, I believe. It's going to be a fun one. A lot of fun, weird shit, excuse my language, went on at NBA Media Days. We're going to be reacting to all that. We're going to give our winners and losers for the Media Days. And then we're also going to be doing, to sort of just jump right back into our preseason preview, if you will. We're going to get a head start by doing our preseason top 10 power rankings. We don't do a whole lot of lists on this show, but we're going to do a list tomorrow, and that should be fun as well. So keep your eye out for that. But until then, that's going to do it. So unless Emmy has anything else he wants to say, we are good to go.
Yeah.
So I guess, God, I have one in mind. I guess just like Texas, chances of being back after giving Alabama a game and looking good the first 3 weeks. We are gone.
Peace out.